has the public meetings where we want people to come tell us their problem. It's like they were lined up. Tell us what we want.
Hold that button down. Either one. Hold that button down and point it at the screen.
They don't care at all.
Let us show up here. Point it at this screen.
Yeah, you either have the ones who just want to complain, or who want to tell you that what you need.
You told me right now. So you know, and if it doesn't, then it's timed out and you have to start it. So I see what you mean about the ranks. Rank over into first place.
There was a little asterisk that says
Oh, well, yeah. From your perspective,
we're evaluating
cool off a couple of different.
variation of it, but I don't know.
Afternoon, everybody. Call to order the July 10th, 2019 TTCC meeting. First, want to make introductions. I'm Jim Urban, Planning Director of Oldham County. Larry.
Larry Cheney, Kipta.
I'm John Stratton with the University of Louisville. Matt Vignay, City of Jeffersontown.
Brittany Montgomery, Town of Clarksville.
Jim Silliman, Oldham County.
Aida.
Aida Kopik-Tak.
Michelle King, Metro Air Pollution Control District.
Dirk Cohen, Louisville Metro.
Jeff O'Brien, Louisville Metro. Tom Hall, KYTC District 5 Planning.
Judy Hickerson, KYTC District 5 Planning.
Tanya Hinton, KYTC Central Office.
Eric Rothermel, Federal Highway.
Curtis Hockenberry, Shepherdville.
Scott Fleming, City of Shepherdville.
Bob Stein, United Consulting.
JC Stites, private citizen.
In the back.
Ashley Woods, Regional Mobility Council.
Ricky Holt, Travel.
Bradley Boone's Air Pollution Control District.
Craig Butler, Air Pollution Control District.
Keith Dameron with American Engineers.
Zach Herzog, GIS.
Elizabeth Park with KIPTA.
David Burke with Kipta.
Andy Rush, Kipta.
Nick Bale with Kipta.
Amanda Dethridge with KIPTA. Sarah Bear, KIPTA.
Great. Again, thank you all for coming. The first order of business is the June 12th meeting minutes. If everybody has looked them over in good order, ask for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the minutes. Any comments? All those in favor then say aye.
Aye.
Don't expect any opposed. Ayes have it. Next item is the public comment period. Anybody from the public that wants to make a statement that this is their opportunity. Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. My name is JC Stites, local business owner. I am on the Parks Board, but I'm just here as a private citizen today. Many of you know that CNU, Congress for New Urbanism, held their Congress here in Louisville just a few weeks ago, and it was a huge deal. Many of the nation's best and brightest urban planners came to Louisville, and I can tell you that they were really impressed with the city. Our bounty of neighborhoods and architecture and parks are world class, and they saw that, and I heard them talking about it. And so why is that? Why is Louisville such a livable, cool city with these great assets? And I think the answer is, or can be found looking back 150 years ago to when in the late 19th century, Louisville was really a happening place. We were the 10th largest city in the country. We invested wisely in our future, beautiful buildings, miles of streetcars, parks, clean drinking water, etc. We grew rapidly at that time, and everything was built at a human scale. And our old neighborhoods and business corridors make us a very livable and unique place. And all the great cities of the world are built around people, not cars. And so that is something you can, name a great city that was built just for cars, and you have a hard time. I mean, you might be able to think of a few, but there's going to be a lot of pollution, a lot of sprawl, and the long-term viability of that community is not very good. So KIPTA, I know, while your past has been about expanding highways and building ring roads and things of that nature, I hope that the future can be different and that you can prioritize people over just cars and moving traffic. And so I think our city, our planners, our mayor are ready to move forward and with a new vision and move forward to create an authentic city built at the human scale. We need help in repairing the roads that we have. There's a lot that you all can do as far as investment in public transportation, in bike lanes, in road diets, traffic calming, and complete streets. All these things are vital to the long-term viability of the city, and I think should be of the highest priority over things such as ring roads and highway expansions. So I think I'm here to just say urge you to help Louisville become safer, more livable, and improve the economy for the future. And I think Louisville's humans will appreciate it if you do that.
Great.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate the comments.
Absolutely.
Anybody else in public comment? I know he just walked out of the room, but anybody want to comment about what we just heard? Okay. There being none, we'll go on to the next item, which is the TTC report from Larry.
Yes, sir. The TTC met June 27th, and at that meeting, they took the recommendations from this body and approved the amendments to the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, to the Transportation Improvement Program. Also, the TTCC had recommended the formation of a subcommittee, a TTCC subcommittee for freight, and TPC approved that. We'll be sending out something in the next week or so about the first meeting of that group. We also, at the TPC meeting, approved the additional obligation authority that was requested by the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, and we heard administrative modifications. That concludes the report.
Any questions about Larry's report to the TPC? Next item is the quarterly project review. Nick?
Yes.
And action will be requested at the end, so.
That's correct. Wait for the seconds just to pop up on the screen. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nick Vale. This is the quarterly project review. We've got quite a bit going on this quarter, mostly in terms of potentially awarding a significant amount of funding to existing dedicated projects in our region. But just for everyone's quick overview, those who aren't here on a monthly basis, the quarterly project review process started as an outcome of a growing carryover balance in the Kentucky side of the river. And in 2016, the TPC approved a project management process that laid the framework for how TIPDA staff works with the LPAs to kind of ensure there's transparency and accountability when it comes to project management. Each quarter, project sponsors submit progress reports. There's opportunities for cost increases periodically, as well as opportunities to shift phases when projects are delayed. There are some rules in regards to managing costs and when costs increase. I won't get into the details, but they're up here on the screen for you all. And then, of course, managing schedules. There's also rules in terms of how often you can shift a project from one fiscal year to the next. This quarter, technically for Indiana, we're actually starting off fiscal year 2020. It began July 1st for them. So I'll give a quick breakdown of our 4 dedicated funding programs in Indiana. The Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program, $1.1 million has been programmed at the beginning of this fiscal year. We haven't had any obligations to date. Same thing with the Highway Safety Improvement Program. For the Surface Transportation Block Program, the obligation that was made this month is actually NDOT's Heavy Haul Road, which is the funds are obligated and secured, but that project has had some delays. And then no funds to date have been obligated yet for transportation alternatives projects. I will say in looking back at fiscal year 19, we were able to obligate all of our funding for the fiscal year, and so projects are moving forward on track. And we'll talk next a little bit about the proposed changes or proposed awards for projects. Essentially, during this quarter, we've done something that we don't typically do each quarter, is we've gone ahead and tried to come up with a plan, working with the project sponsors to award funds for the remainder of all the current existing dedicated projects. So in Indiana, there's probably 12 or 15 projects that are ongoing, that are in our current TIP, have at least one phase of funding in our current TIP, but are not fully funded through the construction phase. So some projects, utilities might be scheduled for 2021, but obviously with our TIP, we don't have any funds awarded yet for construction. So we worked with all the project sponsors, identified what their project needs were, what the costs were for the future phases. And this is all in preparation for our new transportation improvement program, which is going to go from fiscal years 2020 to 2025. And I'll talk more about that later in the agenda. So in Indiana, sponsors submitted their request for funding. In Indiana, things are a lot tighter than they are in terms of dollars available than they are in Kentucky. Some concessions were made by different LPAs, taking some projects out of the federal aid loop, and others scaling back how much federal funds they requested and paying a little more local match than the 20%. So you, in your packet, included a Indiana project changes document. It's a 2-page document. There are a handful of projects who have what we call newly programmed project phases, meaning they've never been funded before. And so our request today to you guys will be to award the requested amounts that are in the right-hand column on that handout. And then there are 2 projects in Clarksville. Clarksville is definitely one of those cities who's overmatching more than the 20% by and large on almost every project. So there were some concessions made there, and that's why you see those modified project phases in there. Again, this is all in preparation for the development of the new 2020 to 2025 TIP. And essentially everything that I'm going to be asking you guys for approval on is included in this packet. And at this time I am going to, before I ask for action, I'd like to know if there's any questions or comments about projects that are included in this list. Some of the projects you see, as I mentioned, they're all ongoing. Some of them, a lot of these are reconstruction projects, fixing what we have first before we expand roadways. Clarksville and Jeffersonville have a bike pedestrian focused project. Floyd County has a complete streets focused project in there, as well as New Albany's East Main Street to State Streets, also essentially making that a more walkable street. So with that, I can answer any questions you have. Otherwise, I'll request action. Are there any comments or questions?
I don't see any, so you want to just do the Indiana projects first?
Yeah, we'll do that first.
Okay.
So my request is for TTCC to recommend TPC approval of the Indiana newly programmed project phases and the modified project phases included in the proposed changes handout.
Sounds like a motion. Does anybody want to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Brittany, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any other discussion about the motion to approve the Indiana projects? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it.
All right, thank you all. Moving on to Kentucky, we're still in fiscal year 19. We have until September 30th of 2019 to move projects forward and get those funds obligated. Again, we only have 2 programs for which TPC has the authority to award federal funds for. That's the Surface Transportation and the Transportation Alternatives programs. For the Surface Transportation program, at the beginning of this fiscal year, we had about $73 million programmed in projects, and to date, we've obligated just a little over $9 million, $8 million of which was obligated in this last quarter. So that's a huge step there. We've got one more quarter to get us to essentially what our minimum goal is to hit that $19 million obligation mark. That ensures that we don't add to our existing carryover balance in Kentucky. In the other program, Transportation Alternatives Program, there was an obligation of about $600,000 for our J-Town ADA ramps and accessibility project. And I've reached out to KYTC staff to make sure that we're in the loop on any future TAP obligations, because we really are hoping to hit about $1.2 million in obligations to ensure that there's no lapse in funding. In this program, there's always the potential to lose funds if they're not spent in a timely manner, unlike the surface transportation programs. So that's kind of a high-level look at how things are going. In your packet, you also receive progress reports for all of the dedicated projects that TPC has agreed to fund. Moving on to the proposed changes, again, similar to Indiana, we asked every project sponsor in Kentucky who had an existing dedicated project to let us know how much the future phases of that project were going to cost. In doing so, we were actually able to fund 100% of the requests that were made. We had about $86 million available through fiscal year 2025. We get about $20 million a year. So we had about $86 million. We got $78 million in requests for funds. And this is for a variety of different projects. The Every Commute Counts program, which is our local van pool program, sidewalk projects, bike ped projects. If you look at the vast majority of page 2, these are bike and pedestrian related projects that LPAs are really focused on when it comes to using our dedicated funds. So I think you can kind of tell where some of the priorities are when it comes to the dedicated funds in our region. There's a few of these phases that are in fiscal year 21, I believe, maybe a handful. So those will be modified into the existing TIP. All of the other changes that would be made upon your approval and TPC's wouldn't take effect until the new TIP is adopted early 2020. So the action today is to recommend TPC approval of the newly programmed project phases. Again, I can answer any questions or comments you have about these. What this action does is it fully funds every single project that's in our dedicated program to make sure that they have the funds available to complete that project in a timely manner. I think that also gives some people some assurance when it comes to scheduling utilities, that they can tell the utility companies we've got the federal funds secured for that construction phase, which I know has been somewhat of an issue. I'll ask for any comments or questions on this action before I make it.
Well, one comment, Nick.
Sure.
All of it will not be documented yet because we haven't put together the new TIP that goes out to 2025. So these changes will be reflected in the current document through 21 if there are changes in 21, and then the new TIP will reflect what we're going to approve today.
Correct, yeah. There's 3 or 4 changes in here that have 2021 dollars. Those would take immediate effect later this month through an administrative modification. All of the others would wait until the new TIP is presented and approved.
Yeah, so it still will have to be approved by both committees.
Okay, so any questions regarding projects?
Okay, can I just ask a quick question? So with that $8 million, we have $8 million left over. I mean, are you anticipating having a call for projects, or how are we anticipating doing it?
We have discussed that internally. $8 million, while it sounds like a lot, it doesn't. I don't think it's going to stretch very far when it comes to a roadway project. There's no reason why we can't do that. We are definitely going to have a call for transportation alternatives projects because we have about $6 million out through 2025, and that can more likely be spread around maybe 4 or 5 projects. So yes, that is a consideration we can make, and if there's direction or advice from this committee or TPC, we would definitely do so. I don't think we were intending to just because it's such a small dollar amount, but it's not out of the realm of possibility at all.
It was just a question, wasn't it?
Sure. And yes, that still leaves our $3 to $4 million for cost increases annually. That's in our back pocket as well.
I think you just answered the question I was going to have, just to make sure that we've got the 3 to 4 million covered already.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments?
You did a great job of actually making a motion statement.
Sorry.
You want to do that again?
Sure. So staff's request is to recommend TTC approval of the newly programmed project phases.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions about the motion? All those in favor then say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Nick. Next agenda item is the Connecting Kentuckiana MTP, Elizabeth and Sarah.
Yes. So excited. Okay, so Elizabeth and I are here today to kind of update you all where we're at with our MTP update. So this presentation will really be focusing on the finalization of our project development phase and give you an update on where we are with the projects we've evaluated and reviewed over the last 6 to 9 months or so. Just want to be clear because we're having another agenda item that's also about another process. Just want to be clear, this one is to skip this process and for our MTP and our project updates. Right? Okay. So we're going to start with the timeline of Connecting Kentuckiana. Just to give you all some review before we dive into the full list of projects that we have. So this all started because we had to update it, but because KIPTA staff wanted like a better way to incorporate all the data that we have, as well as a way to incorporate performance-based planning and be more transparent to you all with what we have and be more transparent to the public. So this started about this time last year where staff was kind of brainstorming new ways to have projects submitted and projects be evaluated and came up with the online application and the assistant tool, which many of you came to the workshop in October where we kind of taught you how to use the tool to draw your projects and for all the layers to come up and answer the questions on the application. We held a couple workshops and helped you all kind of learn it and get through it to be ready in November for the application opening. So you all were able to submit projects through January. We got a lot of ones that were in the current MTP Horizon 2035 and new projects for Connecting Kentuckiana. We also just want to reiterate your hard work and how we appreciate it because it was a good process. So from that point in January, when the application closed, we continued to evaluate projects because we started evaluating them as they came in. So we evaluated and reviewed projects from January until about April or May. Did you all say? About several months. So we reviewed and evaluated all the projects, and in late May, we kind of reviewed again and made our first draft list of all the projects that were submitted to us. And at that point, we then called on you to come in for consultations to review your projects if you wanted, in which many of you all did and asked questions about the evaluation of your project and getting to know the criteria better. And we're just there to answer all your questions. So that happened last month, well, at the end of May and at the beginning of June. So that leaves us here today where staff has our final draft of scores and their performance ranks for you all to view over today. But before we get into that whole list, we just kind of want to give a review of our evaluation approach, which is based in performance-based planning and it's a data-driven process. As you see, here's a snippet of the evaluation itself, just to kind of follow with how we did it. So evaluations are calculated by the need of criteria, which is a range from 0 to 5, and the degree and impact a project can have on the need. And the need is determined by the focus areas, which we presented to you, different TAD reports, crash analysis, clusters of shopping and employment, and other areas of concern that you were asked questions about in the project applications. So the impact, the other portion to the evaluation, is how well a project can contribute to the need of the area. So as you can see on the little evaluation snippet, the first line of zeros would be the need score, and then the second line of zeros would be the impact score, which are then calculated to be the score for each individual criteria. So Each line is a criteria that's directly related to one of the performance measures that we have presented to you all as well. And so once we're done evaluating, all those individual scores are then summed up to a total score, which is then converted into a rank, which Elizabeth will start to talk about now.
Yeah, so that brings us to our mini list. Does everybody have the giant list that's up front? If not, I can grab one for you. And I'm also going to be putting lists on your table that are split by mode. So these are the project types. Just for y'all's information, many of you saw them in our consultation meeting. Recognizing that projects, I forgot those, thank you. Not like a roadway project versus a bike side project. Their ranks might look different, especially compared to overall projects and then based on each other.
Oh, they are?
It's broken down. She just passed out.
Roadway project.
So the big list is the one that we're focusing on to approve today, or to approve for the proposed list. So as Sarah was saying, in the evaluation, all the criteria are added up together, and that gets you your final score. And then the rank was calculated based on the highest scoring project and the proportion of projects that fit against that highest scoring project, which I think was like the 293 was the highest score. So that's how the ranks are divided. So again, all modes together. So this list is what we would like action on to continue with the MTP update, recognizing that we have to do performance dating review and then drafting the document to go out to public comment, and then the final document that will hopefully be adopted early next year. So I want to reiterate what we told you in your consultation meetings as well. The ranks are just a measure of how the projects go against our performance measures that you all approved, and then the goals and objectives of CK 2040. So low-ranking projects are not bad projects. It's just that they might not hit all the criteria of their performance measures. And so that's something to keep in mind, that the ranks are a tool to help guide decision-making, but it's not a gateway for funding. So there's no low projects can still be funded. And the rank will carry forward for the life of the MTP, so for 4 years. And at that point, we would be working with new data and new conditions because the projects have been completed and we have a new situation on the roadways. So this is just for 4 years. And questions? Yes.
Well, I know that the sidewalk gap, filling sidewalk gap counts for substantial points.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think I understand that you only used, if we have a sidewalk on one side, you didn't call that a gap.
Yes.
Correct.
For our gap analysis.
But I think the Metro's position is that if we have multi-lane roadways, 2 lanes in each direction or more, that we really have to have sidewalks on both sides. I mean, I've got a project, lots of community support for on Newburgh Road, and across the street we've got a sidewalk, so you don't identify that as a gap. But we don't want people going across 5 lanes to get to that sidewalk. And so I'd like that consideration in the sidewalk gaps, because I think that would really change some of the.
That's something we can consider later. That's something, but certainly as we start to fill those gaps, first thing we need to do is to create the network. Then we start looking at things that go beyond that. But we're trying to fill the holes first.
But here's my point: like at Dixie Highway, we had no sidewalk, so they can't get to the intersection to cross the street.
Right.
To get to the sidewalk that you're saying is not a gap.
Yes.
So then they are walking mid-block, and that sidewalk is incredibly important. And anyhow,
just to consider that, but I strongly support that change. And then, have no clue whatsoever the ranking of programs. And I see CARE, which is fully funded through CMAQ funding on the Indiana side, and doesn't have a steady for the next 4 years, I think, but doesn't have a steady income stream, but ranked low as a program, and that kind of befuddles me.
Do you have the page? Did you find Karen here? So programs in, we have one study that was submitted that wasn't a group project threshold. Those were calculated. Oh, if you go to page 37, there's a program on there. So we didn't run programs and studies through the evaluation sheet that Sarah put on the screen. It was a more pared down version because there's not a location to base it off data. So we did do our best with trying to match it. How well will a program or study address, safety on roadways, so crashes, or air quality was a consideration. And
Well, I think CARE would be a good air quality.
Yeah.
but if that's the only performance measure that it was addressing compared to, I think there were probably 20 or so, then that's where it may have gotten below. It doesn't mean that it's not important. And again, that's why the rank is not the end all be all. It's really just how the projects and programs that are doing kind of the umbrella work, the everything, are the ones that did score better because they're addressing more criteria.
The rank lets you know how these projects measure up to what you said was important through the development of the goals and objectives and performance measure. I guess Metro's looking to, I guess CARE was, and I'm going off topic a little bit, I'm sorry, but CARE is funded through CMAQ on the Indiana side because that's coming through KITA. We have the option to, yes. And we don't have that option. Don't have that in Kentucky. CMAQ funds. Wish we did. HSIP as well. We have both of those in Indiana. We did too. So, you can help us lobby for that. We do it every time we meet with education. Yeah, I'll support that. But CDB, so STBG, SLO forever for me. But anyway, so I guess when we're talking about, I think we want to have that discussion about bringing CARE into the STBG process. But certainly eligible for the funding. Yeah. All right. Sorry to get off track.
While we're on that though, about programs, with the criteria or the version of the criteria that applies to programs, is that, I'm sure y'all presented that before and I don't have it in my memory bank.
I don't think it's ever been presented.
Just so that when in future years, when we present those programs, we can make sure to highlight the most important pieces as they impact that criteria.
So it's not on this sheet, and I can send you the sponsor list for yourself. We had sections for transit and motorized vehicle access, air quality. So that's kind of how, like in the PMP, the performance plan, how they're broken up like that. That's how our evaluation is broken up as well. So we basically just took the performance measure and phrased it as a statement,
I'm sure our project submission was probably more crafted with the CMAQ criteria in mind, so we may not have highlighted the best parts for this evaluation process. So
we did try to examine all of those and see and explore what kind of impact they could possibly have. And we were pretty generous, I think, with the program analysis.
We tried to be because they weren't mappable. Well, some of them were actually, some studies. But yeah, we did try to be generous. But again, this is the first time that we've been doing this, so room to grow in the future.
we're all learning too.
Yes. Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you. It's good report, but I am saddened to see that some of the transit projects are scored very low. Some are scored high, which is fleet replacement. Obviously, we all know how much low score, considering the impact of moving people and the trends that this community is changing to embrace multimodal and other transportation options. And I know we did criteria, and I know we all participated in all, but maybe we need to revisit this criteria. Really, I mean, transit projects score low makes no sense. It's just wrong.
We'd love to go over that with you in more detail at any time. Sit down and kind of go over how
And then the common trend will carry the projects for life of implementation. This is very heavy comment. So if we are low, we stay low for next 5, 10, 15 years.
That does not mean, and Elizabeth said that does not mean you will not get funding.
Sure, but
It's just, we're trying to take what this group and TPC said was important in our region and take all of the projects that were submitted and reflect that in these rankings. It doesn't mean that the lowest ranked project could not get funded tomorrow.
And one thing to keep in mind about the ranks and scores in general is if in where the project is, there's not a high need for what the project is proposing, then that would ultimately result in a lower score. So if there's not a high need in a certain area, you might have a need score of 0 or 1, which doesn't multiply well against the impact of 0, 1, or 2. So that could be a benefit, knowing that a particular project has, like, the project is in an area where those needs are already met.
If you've
Do you
got,
follow what I'm saying?
if you've got an interstate that's not congested and someone proposes a widening of the interstate, that project will get a low score because it doesn't address congestion. So it's, and that's the way, yeah.
But still, considering the benefits of transit for moving people, benefits for the community, needs for improvement, and lack of transit in the region. I hear you all, but I'm just saying that maybe our criteria need to be revised.
Well, for me, I think what the assumption was when we were doing this was it would help us to actually prioritize the projects by using the rank. And then we're saying, okay, you can still have a low rank and get the project funded. It is contrary to the theory and principle behind the whole. I think that's what everybody's responding to.
I just have a question for Aida. If you had, are all park and ride lots to be treated the same, no matter where they are located? Are they all equally important?
Yes and no. No.
See,
The location is
we've
critical.
tried to capture the fact that there may be differences between where one park and ride lot is located and another. So what the rank represents is if you have to decide between funding parking, park and ride lot A or B, which one is going to provide more positive impact than the other if you can only go forward with one at this time. It's not saying that park and rides are bad projects. We think all these projects are good, but if we have a limited funding source, this is a tool to help us to decide what might be the best use of those limited dollars today. We're not saying park and ride's bad. We're just saying sometimes we're going to have to make some tough decisions, and this tool may help us to make those decisions.
I noticed, I think that now the roof circulator is also low score, which actually was CMAQ funded. So, I mean, there was a need. Things like that. So, and once again, this is more comments and observations considering the overall drop in a bucket money that goes into transit investments. Drop in a bucket, comparing with other investments in regional. And those are all my comments. I have no more comments.
I think that this is helpful for us to see the whole region as a whole. Because a lot of times we're so focused on our individual communities and our individual projects, and this lets us see where the priorities really need to be as a whole in the community. And I know in Indiana our funding, focus there, but it's better to see, I don't know what's going on in Kentucky. I come over here a good amount, but to really see where those needs are. So when we're looking at stuff, to be able to say, wait, that didn't show that there's a real need here. Maybe we don't need to expand this interstate, or maybe we don't need to do this project. As we're looking at it from a region as a whole, I think that helps us as overall as a group, because there's so much going on to be able to do this. So I appreciate what you guys have done because it enables us to see the whole picture compared to just our little focus area. And I agree with Aida that there are things that you have to look at those extenuating circumstances. But when you're trying to vote on these projects and you see all this, let's just be honest, we don't have the time to go through those individual things. So this is just another tool that we can look at and look at it regionally instead of, again, just your small little community.
Brittany, I agree with that, 100%. Anybody else have comments at this point?
I'll kind of echo what Brittany's saying. I mean, I think that, I guess I will take a few minutes and address what Mr. Stites said earlier. I think that this is going to let us see where our priorities are and how our goals and our scoring system that we've put in place, I know we voted on that, is going to lie. And I think that it says to me we probably need to be a little bit more aggressive on some of our transit stuff, some of our complete street items, and I'm still seeing a lot of things that say widening next to them. That includes metro projects too. That and then we throw the play this game too. Where we say we're going to widen the road, we're going to make bike and ped consider those sort of connections. And so I think that that's not good enough for this region. I think that our traffic and roadway fatality statistics show that. I think our air quality statistics show that. I see a couple projects on here which are pure connectivity projects, and they're scoring low. We just don't have enough modal choice, and the only way. I got another notice sitting on my desk today that we're doing a study to widen I-65 through Bullitt County. And the only way we're going to get away from that sort of stuff, which is it's a fool's errand. I mean, we're foolish to think that that's the way that we should be going. I mean, other cities are widening interstates and doing that stuff too, but frankly, for the urbanized part of the city, and we don't need to ignore cars, but I'll tell you, there's a couple places in this community where it's where we have big city level congestion for a mid-sized city, and that's all due to the fact that we've only built for a car. We've not built a transit system. We've not built sidewalks. We've not built shared use paths. And so I think that as we're doing our COA process, I mean, it's been very clear there is one way to get to the airport, one real way to get to the airport, and that's in a car. And that's, we think about the thousands and thousands and millions of visitors that come to the city for the different attractions. I mean, that's just not good enough. I mean, we're going to be forever widening I-65 and tearing down neighborhoods and impacting our community's air quality. So I think that I think this is an eye-opening tool for us. So I hope that we're really considering that as we go into this next MTP and as we start thinking forward the next MTP. Because I really think we need to strengthen as a committee and as an organization and as a region our commitment to multimodal transportation. We're just going to be in the same cycle. We're only going to hear the pounding on the doors are only going to get louder. And I'll tell you this as somebody that's I'm sitting here for Metro Economic Development today, and I'll tell you somebody that sees these requests come into Metro Economic Development. Companies ask us two questions. Their first question is, how much are you going to give us? The next question is, tell us about your bike lanes and your transit infrastructure. We can tell them how much we can give them, zero. I think they'll know that story from Little Metro. And how's your transit and bike network? It kind of sucks. So that's tough. That puts an automatic disadvantage for, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, in Asheville, insert Midwestern city here. So I think that's something we really need to be considering, that this is only going to get worse for us if we don't start getting a bit more aggressive on some of these other things.
Yeah, we've tried to capture that really well in the evaluations, because I think the maximum points you can get in the non-motorized section is over 100. So, there's a lot of opportunities there for those types of projects. And I think some of the highest scoring ones are premium transit corridors that have like shared use paths and divided bike lanes and all of the things that we want. So there is progress.
I would like to go back a couple of years from where we were and where we are today, and look at the way this body is thinking about a project. Now, yes, these projects have recently been submitted. Everyone had the opportunity to add all those things in those new projects. Some did, some didn't. It has to be a choice made by the project sponsor. We can't do it. All we can do here is say, this is a type of project the whole group would prefer, money is going to be an issue. You can't always build a sidewalk if you're building or reconstructing a roadway. But we're trying to make the point that if everyone will think about building a project that serves everyone rather than just a portion. So don't just build a multi-use trail if you need to widen if you need a bike lane, if you need transit on it. Think holistically about all of that. Build one good project instead of three that just partially address the problems. And we've tried to do this data collection and data analysis, show you where those places are, show you where you've got multiple issues. You've got safety, you've got bike and ped, you've got freight, all in one location and congestion. Take the time to step back and look at that project. What does it need to be? What does it need to look like? And we're so far behind with our transportation infrastructure, not just from a widening perspective, but from bike lanes. I was talking to Randall this morning, Randall Embry, about we've got the Indiana MPO conferences in Fort Wayne. And I just wanted to look at Fort Wayne quickly on the Google's map. And the first thing that I recognized when I brought it up as a full screen was it is riddled with trails. The whole community of Fort Wayne and many other small cities in Indiana the trail network is amazing. The inner city trail network, and we're so far behind in Kentucky. Metro, bless you, trying to get the trail built, the loop. But it's something we all need to think about. And we need to think about when we develop projects. And as you bring the projects to the table, our application process and all of the things that we've put together will help guide you in that direction, we hope. So to address your comment, Jeff, yes, the focus needs to be there. We're trying to present the tools to let everybody know that that's where we need to go.
I agree. I think it's eye-opening. I mean, it tells us what we need to be doing.
And Jeff, I agree with you. You know, for me, whatever time frame it was several years ago when we started this, we created a pretty dynamic scoring system by setting these goals and everything. We aren't really, in my opinion, know how to use it. We've got these scores, and yet we're all sitting there going, well, my project only has a low score. And how do we, so how do we take it to that next level? What's the next step? My thinking is that we sometimes aren't including land use in our transportation project planning. And I think that's where we need to come back to is let's look at where the density of population is. And KIPTA staff has done a tremendous job of mapping all this stuff. And so now let's use it. Let's, the next time we all sit down as LPAs and talk about our projects, let's, as a region, really start to use that system. I think that's where we're missing it. I wish Mr. Stites had stayed because the first thing I noticed is that there's a whole bunch of bike and ped projects, not just in Metro, but everywhere. There are some going on where I think we are as a region starting to address bike lanes in Louisville. I mean, it's coming along. It's not where it's not where that economic development project wants us to be, but we're getting somewhere. So how do we, as a region, enhance that focus and look at transit? And, we're widening I-71, but there's no HOV lane, and there's no advantage to getting on the express bus because you're stuck in the same traffic with everybody else. So, we keep making these same kind of, I'll call them mistakes by not looking in relation to other modes of travel. And, we had years ago light rail discussions and kind of fizzled. And
Well, I think it just gets back to we need to go beyond 1950s solutions for 2020s problems.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're doing right now.
Well, and you mentioned land use. That has to be something that the planning commissions decide what we're going to do, what kind of developments you're going to allow. And say, for instance, the fairgrounds closed down tomorrow. Would Louisville Metro let the Toyota come in there and build a plant? Let's hope
Well,
not.
heck yeah, we would.
Well, exactly. My point exactly. And how would those people get there? They would come in on 71.
No, I mean, but I think, all kidding aside, I do think, we look at these projects, and this is something that we face quite severely in eastern Jefferson County, where we have, narrow roadways and winding roadways, and not enough, everybody has to drive their car to go to the parklands. So it's a serious problem, and I just don't, I don't know that, frankly, I think our planning commission is there, but I don't know that our development community, that's the next question.
Exactly.
Are they gonna be, how much do I have to drag the politicians behind me to say, okay, let's deny that and of course, Kentucky Water doesn't even let us deny that subdivision, but let's deny that subdivision because we don't have the right tools.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't stop, knock off then.
See, I mean, there's so many different cogs in this big machine that we have to try to work with as many of them as we can. But, as I said earlier, I mean, we're so far behind with our transportation infrastructure and intermodal infrastructure that we're playing catch up. And buses need roads. You have to fix the roads for the buses to get through. So, or the trucks, or whatever we need for economic development to bring UPS to the airport. All of it has to work together. And we try to reflect that in our evaluation of the projects.
Do you want to put a plug in for the online resource center?
Sure.
Yeah.
Why don't you?
Well, most of you have used it, I hope, with your application process, but just about anything you could want to find as far as transportation infrastructure is concerned is through our transportation planning portal, online resources. Land use, density, congestion, safety, all of that is represented there. The bicycle and pedestrian networks, red flag, environmental issues are on there. As you develop your projects, or as you think of new projects, please use that as a tool. It's all there for you whenever you need it, 24 hours a day.
Follow up on Larry's plug to give an extra plug, because
Well, that's
he's
right.
going to be presenting on the Resource Center this Saturday at MSD's headquarters. We have their training room, and it's part of APC's Clearing the Air workshop series. This is our technical workshop. So along with logic information, Andy's going to be presenting the Resource Center. We're going to be presenting on the EJ screen, another mapping and data tool. So if anybody needs a refresher, this Saturday is your opportunity.
I was just on it 2 days ago trying to prioritize which sidewalk projects we're going to pursue TAP funding with.
I use the EJ study area often for grant project support.
Although Newburgh's still going to be there, even though it's not a gap.
Great. Sarah and Elizabeth, are you done?
If you all are done with questions.
We just need action.
Yeah, so our action is for you all to recommend approval to continue the Connecting Kentucky and a 2040 update, including any analysis, review, and considerations using the draft list of projects and their associated performance ranks.
That's a long motion. Anybody want to repeat that? Or just make a motion to approve that?
I make a motion, we approve it as written on the screen.
There you go. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Tim. Any other discussion about the motion now? There being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Next item is the fiscal year 2020-2025 TIP.
Yes. All right, so this is kind of a follow-on from what we just talked about with the development of the new Metropolitan Transportation Plan. In conjunction with that new long-range plan, we're creating a new transportation improvement program. And I was just going to briefly kind of go over what this entails for you all. You should have all received, all of our project sponsors that is, should have received an email last week with a memo with detailed instructions on what we need everyone to do in terms of updating their project information forms, but I'm going to go through and kind of hit the highlights here. So a little background on the development of the new TIP. Currently, our TIP covers fiscal year 18 to 21. That's 4 years. With this next one, we're actually going to be expanding that to cover 6 years. This helps us just plan those programs and make sure that there's some guarantee for projects that they have their construction programs kind of set in stone, so that they can tell everyone the money is secured. Of course, any projects that are included, or any projects that are planned to receive federal aid or state funds must be in the TIP, as well as any locally funded projects that are regionally significant, which is a little bit of a vague term, but if you have any questions about that, please let us know if you have a locally funded project that you think may be regionally significant. TIP development, again, we're going to be very much aligned with the schedule of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, the Connecting Kentucky Horizon 2040 schedule there. So we're going to be working in conjunction with Sarah and Elizabeth and David and the whole team. And then again, I sent out those emails last week with instructions for everyone, and I'll get into a little bit of that here. So when it comes to what's currently in the existing TIP, any and all of those projects will be grandfathered into the TIP with two caveats. One being that the projects must have secured or have received some funding between fiscal year 20 and 25. So if your project is wrapping up in 2019 and it's going to be complete and there's no future funding for 2020, that project is not going to carry over into the new TIP. Or if for some reason you have a project that starts in 2026, that project is also not going to show up in the TIP. So we're just looking at those 6 years of projects that have funding secured, received, awarded. There's lots of kind of different words to talk about the funding commitment. The PIFs that were sent out, so everyone got an email with a link to a Dropbox with all these PIFs, project information forms, I should say, and you can download each one of those. Staff went ahead and took information that you guys submitted through the MTP process and incorporated that into the PIFs, so that you guys do not have to do that. Now, of course, you can double check us to make sure it happened if you'd like, but we made sure that we want to try to take some of the administrative burden away from y'all and use that information and dump it right into the PIF for the new TIP. There's also a separate list inside of your Dropbox folder that includes all of your projects that were not included in the current TIP, but that you may like to introduce into the TIP, and I'll touch base on that in just a minute. Some quick instructions here. This is a watered-down version of the memo that I sent out. I won't try to break y'all too much on this, but essentially step one of the process is opening up that Dropbox link, reviewing those PIFs, updating any project information, particularly that open to public date, making sure that is accurate as it can be at this time. Step two, add any recently awarded or secured funds to page 2 of that PIF, which is the funding table, which shows which fiscal year, what funding program, what's the local match, yada yada yada. So those two things are the highest of priorities if you can do nothing less. I know it's a very time-consuming process, so I try to point out the highest priorities here. Then step 3A is what I'm calling, if you have a project that is currently open to the public and we sent you the PIF, then in our minds, I think to the public's minds, that project is complete regardless of whether bills still need to be paid or things of that nature need to be signed off on. If the project is open to the public, we want you to indicate that in the project completion status on page 1 of that PIF. In the bottom left-hand corner, it'll ask for like date opened or something to that effect. And that's all you would need to do. You wouldn't need to touch anything else on the PIF because you're telling us that project is open, complete, and we can basically take it off of the MTP and the TIP in almost every case. And then there's those projects that have no changes to the PIF. If there's nothing that needs to be changed, there's a I think it's a little click button at the bottom of page 3 that says above project has no changes. So if there's no changes, quick and easy, click that button, email it to us, you're done. And then lastly is that all of these PIFs will need to be submitted no later than August 30th, so about 6-7 weeks from now. Okay, so that is kind of the instructions for existing projects. Now for new projects that you'd like to add to the TIP. Sponsors can introduce new projects to the 2025 TIP if they were submitted through the Connecting Kentuckiana project application process, and the project has fiscal year 20 to 25 funds available or secured. The list of those projects is included in the Dropbox link that we sent you. It's a file called CK No Tip, meaning the projects were submitted to the Connecting Kentuckiana, but are not in the current tip. If any of those projects in that list have secured funds recently or have funds committed, we can add those projects can be introduced into the new tip. All you need to do is alert myself or Amanda about which KIPT IDs those are. We'll get those PIFs out to you guys, and we'll make sure that it's pre-filled with any information that you would have submitted through the MTP process. And then all you'll have to do is review that, identify the funding on page 2, because obviously that'll be something new on the PIF that isn't there currently, and then resubmit that by the end of August. So I know that's a lot of information. I wanted to make sure we can get to the next item with enough time, but I'm definitely willing to take any comments, questions, concerns that anyone has here. Hopefully you've all had a chance to at least take a look at that email. I know you still got plenty of time to work on those. There's no action needed on this item, so if there's any comments or questions.
Questions? Don't see any. Thanks.
All right. Thank you all.
Next item is the shift working group. Larry?
Yes, sir. On your agenda, it says Strategic Highway Information Formula, which is not true. Blame autocorrect for that one. Strategic Highway Investment Formula for tomorrow, which is a shift process. Back in March, we had the opportunity to present 54 projects to the Transportation Cabinet for consideration in the first stage of that shift process. For those of you who don't know, the shift process is the new methodology that the Transportation Cabinet is using to put together their draft 6-year highway plan. And we're, as an MPO and also the area development districts, are given the opportunity for input into that process, which is much, much, much better than the process as it used to take place. So we're kind of excited that not only are the Transportation Cabinet processes changing as far as the data-driven, similar to KIPT's process, but that eventually we'll be able to build a longer range of transportation improvements than we've ever been able to do before through this evaluation process. But what happened is we submitted our 54 projects. The Transportation Cabinet had the opportunity to submit 74, I think, across their entire district. So all those projects were considered. A group of projects which the Cabinet considered of statewide importance were taken off the top of that for a different evaluation process. Projects that were already committed, which means they had a phase of at least right-of-way in the biennium, were considered committed projects, so they came off the top of that group as well. So we ended up with 85 projects as a result of that analysis. And now the MPO has the opportunity to boost those projects, which means all the projects went through the analysis, the shift analysis, and they received a score similar to what we've done here. What we can do is we can add 15 points to each project, to 21 projects, to boost that score. So say the top scoring project was about a 75, say. But we had a project that we think is very, very important that scored about a 45. Well, if the MPO and the Transportation Cabinet both get together and say we're going to boost that project, it could be at 75 as well and compete with the other projects in the final analysis. So that's what we want to do. We received the list of projects about a little bit over a week ago, which didn't give us enough time to put together a working group to do what we did 2 years ago, which we put together the working group to make a recommendation to the TTCC and then the TPC. So what we want to do this time, we have a lot of different information at our disposal. We have the Connecting Kentuckiana analysis of all the projects that we'll bring to the table for this working group to consider. We have the shift scores, and on Monday, the Transportation Cabinet is going to decide which projects they're going to boost. So if we can put together a working group that can meet on next Tuesday, subsequent to that meeting, then we'll also have that information available, so we can more wisely, I think, choose which projects we want to boost. So the action I would like to ask for today is for the TTCC to create that working group and allow that working group's recommendations to be the recommendations that go to the TPC. We're under time constraints here in that we have to have all of that decided by August 14th, which means that we can't go to the next TPC meeting. We can't wait for that next TPC meeting. We have to have it approved this month. So we're in a pinch here, but if we can put a working group together, and I sent out an email to everyone yesterday, giving those who are not here the opportunity by the close of business tomorrow to express their interest in being on the working group. But if any of you want to do that, then we can put that together today and move forward in that manner.
Sounds like it's one meeting. Tuesday next week at 9:30.
A lot of homework in one meeting.
Yep.
9:30.
9:30.
9:30 on Tuesday.
So you're asking for show of hands on who wants to,
Well, first of all, we need to establish a working group.
sorry. Is
So
there
we need a motion to establish a working group.
motion to establish the working group?
Quick question. As far as I recall, there are no transit projects on this list.
No, they're not.
Wrong.
There are not. They're in their process, they're not considering transit, bike and ped, or any kind of dedicated funding in the shift process.
Doesn't mean you can't raise your hand, though,
Well,
I'm sorry.
if I would
Yeah.
be able to impact the change, I would, but otherwise I'm not raising my hand at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. There a motion,
I make a motion
Oh, I'm
to
sorry.
create a working group.
Yes.
there a second?
Second.
Who was the second? I'm sorry, I missed. Matt?
A motion and a second to create the working group. Any questions about that motion? There being none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Next item is to raise your hands if you want to come to be on the working
Well,
group.
the next item theoretically would be allowing the working group to make the recommendation on behalf of TTCC,
Oh,
but
officially,
you know,
okay.
if you want to make that a corollary to the first one, just
No, we'll make it as a separate motion. I didn't even think about that. So we're looking for a motion to recommend that the work group's product goes directly to the TPC. As
Make
opposed
the
to-
motion.
There's a motion and a second. Any questions about that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Now?
yes, sir.
I'll be at. the
That would be
meeting-
good.
I'll be at the meeting next Tuesday. Anybody else want to show up for the working group? Keep your hand up, that way, Larry, you're gonna write down everybody's name, right?
I only see 4, correct?
How many do you think we need?
What are you doing, Mike?
Matt?
Matt?
Okay,
No, Matt?
no Matt. Okay.
I'm assuming there's no flexibility in the time of that, given the urgent nature.
I have to change a dentist appointment to be there, so, it's already gone out in an email, so we kind of said, all right, let's just keep it there unless everybody wants to move it that's gonna be on the committee.
Exactly. Once we find out who is going to be, we may be able to move.
We got 5,
Good.
is that good?
Good.
Now, 9:30 on Tuesday, anybody wanna make it a different time that same day?
I cannot do the afternoon.
Okay.
I'll have to cancel a meeting just to make that happen.
Wanna just keep it at 9:30 then? Everybody good? 9:30 it is.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank
Other
you.
business. I can't let this meeting go without asking about, we've talked about a complete streets work group a while back, and we keep pushing it off, and I keep looking at dirt and doing this, but I'd really like to, in light especially that Mr. Stites made a comment about complete streets, want to make sure that we start that. I know that KIPA staff has been busy doing a lot of stuff.
Well, if you wouldn't mind, if we wait till we get this shift out of the way,
Yes.
and then we'll move on to that. That'll be the next.
We already have do we already have the
We do.
group?
We do.
Yep. Including, I think New Albany will be involved and Jeffersonville will be involved in that group.
I think Clarksville will, when that time comes, we'll have a representative.
Oh, good.
All right. So we'll put it off for just a little bit.
Couple weeks.
Any other business to come before the TTCC? I don't see any, and I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? I'll second. I think I can do that. Thanks, everybody.